You are the epitome of great examples. And with that, let's get started. Welcome, everybody. It is the third Wednesday of the month. That means it's time for my favorite day of the week, and my business day of the week, the Kubernetes office hours. This is our monthly live stream where we get on the internet on this thing called YouTube. We live stream, and then we answer as many Kubernetes user questions from the audience as possible in an hour. So with that, we've got a ton of new people. How is the live stream sounding there? If you are listening in and in the channel, we would love to know. Also, those of you tuning in, you should see our live stream chat here on the side. If you are listening in, please say who you are, where you're from. And so while we're doing the intro, we kind of have everyone introducing themselves, and we'll go ahead and read out your names. And with that, before we start, remember, this is a Kubernetes event, so the code of conduct is in effect. Please be excellent to each other. All right, before we begin, let's start by introducing ourselves. Let's go panel in order. Let's go Jeff, Samaldrama, Tunde, Marky, Pierre, Pav, Chris, and that's everybody. Let's go in that order.
Aren't you going to introduce yourself?
I will go last.
Fair enough. My name's Jeffrey Sika. I'm a senior software engineer at Red Hat. I have been helping out with the Kubernetes community for a few years now. I kind of have special knowledge with the dashboard and batch jobs and cron jobs, things like that. But I have general knowledge of a lot of different stuff. So here I am.
My name is Marky, and I am a Kubernetes contributor. I am part of the release team. I am on the bug triage. I also do ContribX and the mentoring project, along with issue triage for ContribX, and I'm a software engineer. Thanks for having me.
Hey guys, this is Vamshi Samudrala. I'm a senior software engineer at American Airlines, based out headquarters in Dallas, and I started working for Kubernetes community from past 3 or 4 months. Really enjoying it with very good and cool people around in the community, and I've been working with Kubernetes in the past 3 years or so with American Airlines, and started with open source just 3 months ago, and I see how I can help.
Are you going to be raffling off tickets to KubeCon and flights? Asking for a friend. Awesome.
I could, yeah.
Good to have you. Okay, who's next?
Hi, everyone. My name is Tunde. I work for VMware, currently working as a senior customer reliability engineer. It's a customer-facing SRE team, and generally work on Kubernetes. So I have general knowledge about Kubernetes also, and happy to take questions.
So I will go next. I'm Pierre. I'm a software architect. Was long time ago, or until recently, a backend engineer focused on distributed systems, and I'm working for Spectrum. We are building chatbots.
Hey, I'm Pavlos. I'm a software engineer, and I work a lot with Kubernetes, both as a user and as an administrator. Mostly my knowledge is around observability and metrics and how to monitor Kubernetes.
Hi, I'm Chris. I'm a Kubernetes admin. Most of my specialty comes from managing Kubernetes multiple clusters on-prem. I moonlight as a contributor on occasion. I also have my CKA and CKAD. Happy to be here.
Awesome. Okay, so let's go over the rules here and kind of tell everybody how this works. While we're going over the rules, feel free to say hello in chat and where in the world you're listening from. We like to see where everyone's coming from. And also feel free to start queuing up your questions, and I will start reading them off to the panel here. If at some point you ask a question and it's obvious that I missed it or I don't see it, feel free to just ping it again in chat, and then one of the panelists will notice eventually, right? We'll be keeping track of the chat, and as always, remember, we are live streaming on YouTube. All right, so here are the ground rules. This is a judgment-free zone. Everyone had to start from somewhere. So please help out everybody. Not everyone's going to know everything. We're all doing our best to kind of figure this stuff out. So please be supportive of each other. And while we will do our best to answer your questions, We don't have access to your cluster, so there are certain things like you're not going to be able to SSH in and figure out why your network is busted, that sort of thing. But what we will try to do is kind of at least get you started on figuring out what the problem is to help you move forward a little bit, so you can at least have some sort of progress in whatever your problem is. Panelists, you're encouraged to expand on answers with your experiences and your pro tips. Same for the audience. A lot of you are doing this kind of stuff. If you end up talking way too much in chat, we might invite you to just be on the panel, and that's how Pierre got here. So we always love that kind of information. So if there's information that you think is relevant to a topic, feel free to put the URL, just whack it there in chat. As we talk, discuss questions, feel free to look up things in the official docs, things on GitHub you might have seen, awesome blog posts about a certain topic. Just start whacking it all in there. And what I do is at the end of each show, I grab all the URLs and we publish it with the show notes so that you have a nice set of stuff. We've been doing this show for about 2 years, and every single one, there's at least one new tool that we discover each time. So that's the power of community, right? That's why we love to have all these people giving your advice. So feel free to just put your URLs and whatnot right in there, and we'll make sure it goes in the notes. You can post your questions in the chat. You can post them on discuss.kubernetes.io and give us a link. If you have a pre-made question on Stack Overflow that already has a bunch of information, just feel free to whack that in there. Sometimes the best thing this show could do is help get eyeballs on your question, so we can at least help there. So if you have stuff pre-made, we love that as well. This panel is made entirely volunteers, so if you want to rotate in, please let us know. We have some people that are brand new today. I think we have 1, 2, 3, 4 new people and the old people. So what we try to do is have enough panelists standing by, so when we go on the show, you know, sometimes people have work stuff come up. I think Puya's car is broken. I think he's standing at the side of the road right now. So that's why we like to have a lot of volunteers around. It's a great way to give back to the community. It's an hour a month that you can do, and then, you know, if you do it, you do it. If not, it's fine. We have a pool of people that we tap from. So if you're interested in doing that, it is a fantastic way to get started in Kubernetes. That's how Chris got started. Then he started speaking at KubeCon, and now he's doing all this stuff. And he got a CKA, and he's all like, awesome. And lastly, we're DevOps people too. So we like to measure how we're doing as well. So please give us a like, a subscribe. I do have some viewer counts, but it really does help when you retweet or you tell a coworker about us or tell someone, hey, this event is a thing. This helps us look at metrics, look at numbers, and that lets me do things like get more money to give out more t-shirts and equipment. And so that, you know, if possible, somewhere in the world, someone in a time zone wanted to do this, we have everything that they need to replicate this in their time zone. So we're kind of thinking about sustainability and things like that. So please do remember that every time you tweet or you thumbs up or you share something, you're really helping us out, and we appreciate that. And lastly, I'd like to thank the companies for supporting the community with these developer volunteers. They are Giant Swarm, StockX, Pivotal, Pusher.com, Weaveworks, VMware, the University of Michigan, Red Hat, Spectrum.io, American Airlines, and Utility Warehouse. And special thanks, as always, to the CNCF, who's sponsoring the t-shirt giveaway. What we'll do is, if you ask a question during the show, we'll automatically enter you in a raffle. And at the end of this session, we'll give away 2 t-shirts. 2 hours after that, we're going to have another session, and we're going to give away 2 t-shirts. So that's something we're trying new this year, is having 2 sessions. This is the EU time slot, and then we have a West Coast US time slot that's happening a few hours after that. So if you miss this session, you can always catch up. And with that, panel, are you ready? Hello, everybody. The chat is hopping today. Everybody's saying hello. We have over 50 of you listening on the live stream. So we got a lot of Kubernetes questions coming. All right, who's ready to get started? Thumbs up there from the panel. Okay, let's see. First question is from Matt. Welcome. I'm currently using KubeSpray and Ansible Playbook to build my clusters. What are your thoughts on KubeSpray? Would you recommend a different software to automate my cluster builds?
Cluster API.
I guess I would ask, what are you having trouble with exactly with KubeSpray? I've heard lots of good things about it. So like there's 5 or 10 different things that solve slightly different problems, but do mostly the same things. So kind of maybe start there and work out.
Is KubeSpray using kubeadmin and stuff?
I think under the hood it is, yes.
Yeah.
Okay,
And
let me just confirm. I know that wasn't always the case. Keep talking.
I think that KubeSpray and Ansible is pretty good. I know of one very large organization that's using it, and I know one of the maintainers for that project, I believe his name is Chad Swenson, is from that organization. And I can say personally that I have used it because I worked for that organization, and super, super solid tool and very well maintained. So I like it. And Ansible's always a good config management tool.
We use RKE Rancher's installer here, and it's been pretty good. But yeah, whatever suits your needs. I'm just going to find a link. I think I can't remember who it was, but they had a little thread on Twitter about the different installers, and everyone kind of chimed in on that. So it might be a good spot to do some research.
And then I found the GitHub page to KubeSpray here. So I talked to Antoine, like, I say hello every one of the maintainers, and I say hello to him at every KubeCon. I've not heard bad things. The one thing I am looking up to see if it uses kubeadmin. This is a personal rule for myself: is whatever deployment tool you're using, does it use kubeadmin or cluster API eventually? That makes me feel better about whether a SIG is maintaining something. And of course, KubeSpray is under the Kubernetes SIG org, so automatically I'm going to put it a little bit higher than I would another tool. Anybody else have comments on KubeSpray? Anybody in chat have strong opinions? Oh, hey, Max guy, KubeSpray maintainer here. It's using kubeadmin in the background. Happy to answer any KubeSpray related questions. Dope. That is good to know.
Do I sense a KubeSpray office hours coming?
We could do one. So I have seen on the Kubernetes community calendar, there is a kubeadmin office hours. I don't know if there's a KubeSpray office hours, but hopefully, Max, if you have information about an office hours, we'd be happy to say. Let's see what some of the people are saying. Vinayaka says he's been using KubeSpray for the last 3 years. Yeah, he seems pretty happy with it. I think it depends on who owns the installation of clusters. That is a great point to make, I believe. So yeah, welcome Max Guy. We'll just give them some time. And yes, of course, they don't have an office hours, but the channel is pretty active, and that's #KubeSpray on the Kubernetes channel. Okay. Anything else before we move on? We've got Linant says, hello from Finland. Any good tools for making big kube configs more manageable, cleaning up old clusters that don't exist anymore, etc.? He's got some feedback here. Chris says, have you looked at kubectx and kubeends? So kubectx I've heard of.
Yeah, kubectx is an awesome tool to manage multiple contexts in one config. So I use it actually a lot. It's just like keeps track of them and just enables you to quickly cycle between two, for example, as well.
Mm-hmm. And this other one, kubeends?
It's the same for the namespace switching. Basically, you can set your namespace in the kube config. That's all it does. But it's quite nice to use. But for deprecating, like for deleting old configs, I personally just use kubectl delete, config delete, and then delete the context.
Okay.
But yeah.
Linant says he's been using both with FZF, works really well, but got a bunch of clusters that have been sundowned in my current comp. Sundowned, that's a good one. Sundowned or sunsetted? I think sunsetted is also incorrect English. Correct me on that one. Okay, anything else to say about kubectx? I see this tool mentioned a lot when people ask this question on the forums or on Reddit or something, so it seems to be pretty popular there. Hello, everybody. Jeremy's passing along some few interesting links they found this week. Telepresence.io. I don't know how many of you have used that. I've seen that used a few times. It's pretty awesome. Kubeset.io and something called Goldilocks for right sizing your pods. I feel we have looked at Goldilocks on the show before because I remember that name. Hangover Nero asked, great name. So there was an interesting question that another user asked. In the event that you lose all your masters, but separate etcd cluster that's still up and running, is it possible to recover the entire control plane? Great question.
Yeah, I can take this one. Yeah, I expect that you should be able to. You should be able to recover your control plane, especially if the etcd cluster is not corrupted yet, by standing up each control plane one at a time and then pointing them at the existing etcd cluster. So that should be definitely possible.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else? Have you actually done this in real life?
Yeah, I've simulated something like this in the past.
Ah, okay. Simulated, but not real. Just making sure. Yeah. This sounds like way too hard. This sounds like terrible to me. Okay, but theoretically it's possible. That's good to know. Any other comments on this one?
Yeah, we had like an outage where all of the Kubernetes API servers went down, and like it was like, I think it was readiness probe which was constantly like unready, and each and every like single Kubernetes API server would go into crash loop. But once we sort of got rid of that readiness probe and liveness probe, basically everything automatically auto-recovered. So yeah, that basically, if etcd is there and it's running, it should be, you should be good to go.
Okay. All right, let's see.
I think part of the same question Hangover No is asking, is it, you would need to have certs, right, for this?
Yeah, you need to ensure that the search for the existing etcd cluster is being used by the Neo control plane.
Okay. Hey, Jeff, are you handling the HackMD? Because that's really useful if you can continue to do that.
Yeah, I can.
Okay, awesome.
Someone else is already putting stuff in there. I'm not sure if it's you.
Oh, okay. Well, who's ever doing that, fantastic. Okay.
There's something that I was doing it.
Oh, perfect. Okay, good. Let's keep
Teamwork makes the dream work.
Yeah, I don't want to answer all the questions and realize we didn't keep track, and then we'd have to fake.
I think pretty much everybody's also typing. That's cool. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I don't want to have to fake the lottery at the end if we didn't keep track of who's asking the questions. Okay. Moving on here. Next is, so Matt's talking about having problems with certs not re-upping and expiring. If you can give us some more information about that, that would be awesome. We could probably address that. Boom. Gorkum asks, what's your recommendation for a multi-cluster dashboard?
My time has come.
Yes, and I want you to address Joel Speed's answer as well.
Oh, where's Joel's answer?
In the thread, he mentioned cube-ops-view.
That is a good one.
Okay.
I believe Octant will also do multi-cluster, and the Kubernetes dashboard itself, though it doesn't, it is going to soon, because currently the Kubernetes dashboard just looks at a kube config, and we're adding context switching between clusters. So yes, those three.
Okay.
Two and a half.
We're using Rancher for our multi-cluster management. It works quite well. It's a lot if you're just kind of debugging stuff. Octant I use on the side, which is too great, very effectively. And I'm looking forward to this new multi-cluster kube dashboard. I'll have to try that out when it's live.
Yeah,
we're trying to get 2.0 out first, and then after that is going to be working on multi-cluster.
Could someone in the audience dig up the URL for Octant? That'd be really useful. And then Jeremy mentions Cotena Lens was awesome. Is that not being made anymore? I seem to remember that tool. But yeah, I think that pretty much covers all the major dashboard things. Is there anything upcoming from Kate's dashboard that you can talk about? Give us a little TLDR sneak peek, Jeff, or?
So we're doing a 2.0 release. It should be in the next month or so. It's been in the works for a while, but part of the problem is we can't work on the dashboard full time.
Right.
But with that, we're completely redoing the front end. And then after that, we're going to be focusing on more real-time updating, because currently the dashboard was built before there was a thing called watches. So we had to implement our own, so we just didn't. And then again, multi-cluster support. So being able to context switch between different clusters. So it's the big thing there is we are not going to visualize multiple clusters in a single pane of glass. You will be able to see that you have access to multiple clusters and then like peek into them. It won't show like all these pods running across 5 different clusters. It'll be like these pods in this cluster. So that's the one big thing.
Okay. And David seems to be asking a related question. Kate's dashboard 2.0 soon?
Yes, soon.
But you wouldn't call it wouldn't be a 2.0, right? It would just follow whatever version?
No, we are breaking the version. Yeah, we're breaking the version because it is such a vast change in code that the chairs all voted and we went for 2.0.
Okay, good to know.
And there are a couple of other tools that they mentioned, Octant and Rancher.
Yep, Chris just seems to the thumbs up Rancher. He's happy with it. Okay.
It's been my daily driver for the last year and a half, so
yeah,
I'm very familiar.
And all of these tools do have channels in the Kubernetes Slack, so you can hang out and hash Octant or something if you want. Just do it. All right. Anything else about dashboards? See, Jeff, we were going to talk about stuff you work on. I told you. If you have any batch questions in the audience, now's your chance. Okay, moving on here. Tetramonte, hope I pronounced that right, says, I'm trying to administer a cluster currently on a single node on-prem and have hit the storage conundrum. Dun, dun, dun. I added that part. How do you all recommend handling storage on-prem, particularly with a single node? I've looked at Gluster and Ceph, but they state multiple nodes are necessary, and stumbled on Rook, which uses Ceph, but didn't explicitly require 3+ nodes. For my current issue, I could use a key value store as well and like the look of Console, but again, it wants multiple nodes. Is my best option just to bring on 2 more nodes, or can they do it on a single node? The great on-prem storage question has reared its head once again. Opinions?
I can give you some of my experience. I don't know if you have the resources on wherever you are. We are backing onto our NetApp installation using their Trident plugin, so we got around that through those means. When we first started kicking off our tests, we just used NFS drives to meet those ends. Everything else seemed kind of like overkill for just a single node install, but it might work. I'll try to think of one of the smaller ones that's good for single nodes, but yeah, everything else kind of requires a big infrastructure creation to get it going.
I've used Gluster on a single node. There is a way you can sort of do it. It is not it's not recommended, but it is doable. And I think if I look, I can find something to show you how to do that, and I'll post it.
And then David points out Rook and Ceph can be configured to use folders versus disk and one node / replica. Anybody else have experience in this? Anybody else in the audience? It looks like people are starting to paste stuff. Yeah, and Bob just says in a single node, you could just use local volumes, but would that be bad? Well, ignoring the fact that you're only on one node, so you're only going to have a failure thing. It's just putting everything in local volumes bad?
Well, would it not, if you add a new node, it would not be able to scale then, right?
Right. Yeah, I'm just wondering if their use case is only one node and it will always ever only be one node?
Yeah, so that's what I was just going to say. It's like, what is the intent, or what are they trying to accomplish? Because yeah, if it's just testing, local disk should be fine if there's enough storage there.
I think he just wrote that he would like to scale up, or has the ability to scale up.
Yeah.
So, in my opinion, I would just go for 3 nodes. If you have three small nodes available, then you get all the benefits of Kubernetes out of the box.
Yeah, it's just a home lab that I'd be hosting MB and related apps and websites and stuff. So actually, Jeff and I have talked about this for a while. So at home, I run similar services at home, but I just run them as Docker containers. And it was like, hey, wait a minute. Could I do a single node Kubernetes cluster and kind of get all the cool benefits on that? But then if you were to do something like MB, that not, you have a deployment and then you have a service and stuff. And I was like, I don't want to do that for a home lab. I know I'm a Kubernetes person, but
I'm actually having to go through this again
yeah,
after the move.
yeah. Right. So exactly, moving on from Docker Compose for a learning opportunity. Yeah, if it's a learning opportunity, I think absolutely you would want to do that. I don't know if I would go multiple nodes though, because I feel like if you learn the concepts even with one node, you should be fine, right?
Yeah, for learning, it's totally fine. I
Right.
was thinking more of like a small production deployment or something, but it's fine.
Right.
Yeah, I would go one node and then like use local storage. It teaches this concept as well. You
Yeah.
can still learn the same stuff with only one node and local storage. And then if you need to scale up, you can then look into it. I think Kubernetes is very good in teaching only the things you need to know at the moment, and you can always add new things on it later without having to break everything. It's usually quite straightforward. It's not plug and play, but add on is always quite easy.
Yeah. I empathize. I feel like there's Docker Compose and then Kubernetes, but there's still this like huge gap in the middle where I find myself sometimes where I feel like I need to go down the full Kubernetes at home route, but then
you
come to my senses.
You can deploy Docker Compose to Kubernetes, right?
Yep.
I have not done it yet, but I think it's possible.
Okay.
Yeah. I just got reminded by a coworker. We've been kicking the tires on Longhorn, which just got put into the CNCF sandbox, and it works pretty well using local disk. So it gives a nice dashboard and everything. So I dropped a link in there. It's quite easy to install. And
yeah.
And another thing about Longhorn, no joke, there was a CNCF webinar just yesterday, specifically on Longhorn, both like the current version of Longhorn and their plans in the future. And there was a really good demo.
Right. Also, worst case, if they have single node, they can have an NFS server, right? Sacrifice a node to be an NFS server, and then.
Oh yeah, that's a good option too. Yeah, I think I worked on it with the NFS with a single node. Yeah, it works.
Yeah. So Nadir, hey, welcome. Says I'm running a 3-node Rook in home lab. Mostly works, but need to be careful around shutting down individual nodes, which I'm totally not careful about in the home lab. Performance is also not great without 10 gig Ethernet. Eesh. Well, if you're looking for a reason to get that 10 gig E for home, now's your chance. Okay. Anything else about single node storage? Thanks for the question. Really handy. Okay, moving on. Amir's Calico related. Hi, all. First time visitor, new to Kubernetes. Welcome. Trying to deploy microservices at work in Kubernetes clusters using different implementations like Minikube when testing locally on our development machines and then cloud setup in our test lab. Don't know how this K8s cluster is set up. My question is regarding our lab setup, which seems to use Calico. Problem is that IP addresses assigned to the E0 interface in my pods are /32 addresses, which is a bit strange from networking perspective. I couldn't find how to change the subnet mask to a larger subnet. Any ideas? Is this a local config issue or is this? I'm kind of thinking out loud for the panel there. Anybody, audience, have any input on this one? Yeah, I feel like this is like a network. I think I need more information here.
Yeah, my guess is how the network is initially set up. If you're just kind of going to an empty cluster, someone might have initiated the CNI with that. But
yeah. So Amir, if you can hear us, give us some follow-up information, and we will come back to this one. Let's give them a few minutes for that.
I just want to point out this is totally a Bob question.
This is a Bob question. Bob is very missed today. Cillian fans everywhere. Okay, let's move on then and come back to this one. Venkat asks, I've used Valero for Kubernetes cluster backup and restore. Not a production grade cluster, but a small one for learning dev purpose where I'm using a dynamic NFS provisioner for persistent volumes. Valero doesn't support backup restore of NFS volumes and only supports object storage like S3, Minio, and a few others. They mentioned about RESTIC integration, which is possible to back NFS persistent volumes as well. Has anyone got any experience using RESTIC and Valero in an NFS PV environment? Any thoughts, please? I see Amir typing, so it looks like we're going to get more information on that one. Tunde, I was hoping you would know this one.
Yeah, not particularly
Yeah.
experience with NFS, but this Rustic and Valero itself just works great. I've been able to use that and not run into any specific issues.
Yeah, I've been using RESTIC with Valero, but not to NFS. I do see some people typing. Let's see what we've got going on here. Oh, Alex points out that people are talking in the Calico thread, so I'll get more information there. Okay, while we get the information on Calico, any other feedback on Valero
I think
with
there
NFS?
I think the question was from Fumbard Rose. It was about your local deployment or on the lab. I think it was about your local deployment. It was on the local deployment. The question was asked by Amir.
Hold on, let me see that. Let me back up 1 second. So many questions today. This is awesome. Literally.
I mean, I asked if what information you should provide, and I asked if it's about the local deployment with Minikube, or if it's about the lab. I wasn't sure about that. I wanted him to clarify that. That's it.
Okay. Any other feedback on NFS with Valero? Venkat, definitely check out Hash Valero on the Kubernetes Slack. I know there are people listening in there. It is like this, formerly known as the ARC channel. I should know that because I use this stuff, but I've never used it with NFS. Okay, let's move back then to Amir's question here. Alex points out there's a huge thread here. Okay, so Alex points out when you use Calico, all your pods will get a /32 IP address. That's by design. Is this affecting your applications in any way? Alex mentions all traffic coming out of the pod is routed to the pod's default gateway, which goes over a VETH pair to know where the pod is running. Once a packet reaches the node, it is routed to the destination using the node's route table. Nadir has some information here. You'll want to look at Multus if you want to use DPDK. This will allow primary pod networking via Calico, but would allow you to assign an SR-IOV interface as a secondary pod network interface. And then a bunch of links that I'm going to put in the main channel here so everybody sees them. And I will check back on this thread. It looks like we're getting a lot of information here. And I will toss that there. Okay, we're about halfway done. So those of you joining us on YouTube, welcome. This is the Kubernetes Office Hours. Join Hash Office Hours on the Slack channel there on Kubernetes Slack and ask your question and we will queue them up. We are getting to the end of our queue of questions, so feel free to start asking them. Siberian Crane's Nest, which is a nice multi-part question, my favorite. No, that's Mike Larson will be after with the multi-part question. But Siberian Crane asks, I recently came across Kubetetris, which claims to handle/avoid resource fragmentation, starting a new node in a CAS-enabled cluster when it could be managed in existing nodes by rearranging pods on nodes. Isn't there a native solution for this in Kubernetes, or are there any other tools which do the same? So Kubetetris, I've not heard of this one before. Let's check it out. Panel?
I've heard of it.
Yeah.
I'm reading.
Yeah. So I'm curious in real life, how much is resource fragmentation like a real thing that happens on clusters? Jeremy says the descheduler question mark. So it provides a plan for pod migrations that will consolidate chunks of available resources across nodes together. Periodically performing a swap or migration of pods across nodes that keep a healthy balance of different type of resource requesting together on a node. Okay, so for my first question for the group is, do you want to do this? Or do you want to let the scheduler do its thing? Right. I figure if your deployment descriptions are very explicit about the resources that you want and need, would you ever need to go here? I guess is my question.
So we did this but it was about more like we didn't have any resource limits set and we wanted to rebalance it faster than, but that's the only time that I would use it.
Anybody else?
This feels a lot like HPC scheduling wannabe, like the idea of absolutely and totally packing a machine in the most optimal way. And honestly, the Kubernetes scheduler doesn't really do that well. It does some things really well because it's meant to schedule things like, web servers and other long-running but simple processes, not necessarily, hard-hitting things.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just my quick take on it. Like,
Mm-hmm.
yes, there is a need if we want to be truly and completely optimal, but currently the scheduler doesn't necessarily do that.
Yep. Max Guy point out what Jeremy was talking about earlier, the descheduler. I'm personally using a Chaos Monkey to delete and reschedule pods on a regular basis. Okay, let's take a look at descheduler.
I've used descheduler. So descheduler does the opposite thing. It sort of tries to spread the pods in a way that they're sort of, if one node goes down, you're still fine and you still have enough replicas. And it sort of tries to find like nodes with low node utilization and sort of move those pods there. And yeah, it basically does exact opposite.
Yeah. So Joel mentions if you're trying to minimize the number of nodes you're using for cost reasons, then you may want to pack them smaller on dev test clusters. Cluster autoscaler will repack nodes, but by default is configured to be quite safe and would need some tweaking a bit to be more aggressive with the packing. Good tip. Anything else on this one? I feel like if I were using two of these tools, I would really want to pay attention of the resources I'm asking for. And sometimes skeptical might be too strong of a word, but sometimes it's like, you know what? Give as much information to the scheduler as possible and then let it do its thing.
Best practices is you actually define what your application needs. Yes.
Right. Yeah. But I'm just wondering, but then in real life, you go and you have an unbalanced cluster, and then you're like, wait a minute. Right. So I understand why that is. But that's definitely very interesting. But these are two tools that could help there. Any other opinions from the crowd? Aaron Eaton says in some environments, the high watermark for traffic can be 100 times the low watermark. In that case, scale up and scale down can leave us with pods spread across many underused instances. Good point. Yeah. Yeah, I guess as you look at this, it would really depend on the workload right? Yeah. It looks like other people are typing as well. Looks like Alex and Nadir are helping Amir out with the networking there with Calico. We appreciate that. Thank you. Looks like some people are typing. Any last comments here on Cube Tetris and the descheduler and scheduling in general?
It's a hard problem.
Yeah. Although I totally, as Joel mentions that, I totally understand why the default to safe, right? Better to be more expensive and have the services running, I guess. Okay, so moving on, Mike Larson has a three-part question. Awesome. What is a recommended approach when multiple teams, they have about 8 teams, are deploying to Kubernetes? Should each team deploy to stage prod clusters, only running their loads? Or is it better to have each team get granted a namespace on a common organization-wide stage/prod cluster? Can you discuss a few pros and cons from a security and infrastructure management perspective of the two approaches? I see everyone's smiling. Everyone has an opinion. Who's first? Jeff looks like he really wants to go first.
I want to go first and ask: Are your developers doing anything with Kind or Minikube locally? Are they actually testing the deployments and everything locally before they're pushing up to any sort of CI? So that would be my first question.
Mm-hmm.
And then my second question is, assuming that answer is yes, you are validating that locally these manifests work and the applications work. Are you doing some sort of a GitOpsy thing to go from local to stage? Like, are you pushing up something? I'm curious the workflow, because that would inform my opinion a little better.
Mike says yes. So it looks like they've taken care of the local story.
I have many opinions.
Let's do it. That's why we do the show. Give people opinions.
You first.
Okay, so I have worked in companies where they've done it multiple different ways. One of the ways that I have found that has worked the best is local deployment first. You have a Kind or Minikube, you test that everything works. Then you push that to some shared namespace where your team tests features against one another. Then if it's been approved by, let's say, a QA department or some type of regression testing, then it's pushed into some type of staging environment. Then it is tested by your full QA end-to-end testing, and it's gated. Gated means it has some type of approval. It could be a JIRA approval or something. And then that gets promoted to the next environment. Mm-hmm. I have found that works the best. I have found that does less introducing of bugs into prod. That's just my opinion.
I have a question as well. Are your engineers also responsible for running the services that they are deploying? Because then it would make sense to, if they are responsible for running the services, it would make sense that every cluster is similar and not different.
Yeah, I think when 8 teams or 10 teams are different applications that deploying across the clusters, that Maki and Jeff and Pierre mentioned, just that's the right strategies to just go and deploy somewhere in local. If not, the local is available, there should be a dev environment where the first thing testing should be done, and then it's pushed over to stage for the load testings, and there's a process around it to just push to prod. And the second part of the question I would like to answer is each team granted a namespace on a common organization-wide stage or prod clusters? Yes, I think there should be a namespace division or distinction between each app that it's being deployed or each team that is being using. That offers a lot of distinction between the apps and a lot of privileges also between the teams to just run over.
Okay, and Mike's giving us some more information here. He says, I'm also thinking from an infrastructure management perspective. If you want HA and keeping master API up to date, does it not make more sense to manage only a single common stage/prod cluster?
It depends on how much resources you have and the isolation you need. We've done the cluster per staging per environment, going that route. So we kind of box things in so we don't have someone doing a resource hog and say staging and then taking out your prod cluster. So you can compartmentalize them at your whatever risk you're willing to take for those areas.
Yeah, a common topic that office hours usually tackles is how many clusters do I need? And the sad answer is it usually depends. One of the common things that we normally all agree on is per environment. That is usually the line per cluster. And that I completely agree with, just because you usually want an environment where everything soaks, and that's not prod. And you want that very much, separate from an environment where everyone is just pushing and it's the Wild West, because that will always introduce some sort of a resource problem.
Wait, don't we always test in prod?
Always. Yes.
Ditto.
I have my own follow-up question there. How do you all manage something like version skew then, if you've got got all these clusters and I need to do an upgrade?
So usually you version all of your manifests, and then you pick them, like you then promote manifests to certain clusters. Does that make sense? Please nod, because in my head it makes sense. Thank you.
Mhm.
Yeah, so we have, to kind of go on what Jeff's saying, so we have a QA branch, dev branch, prod branch. QA branch syncs with QA cluster, dev branch syncs with dev cluster, prod with prod. So you kind of box it in like that. So you could go the step further and have like version tags and having something like Argo or Flux sync against those Git artifacts and then go like that. So it really doesn't matter where the cluster is, as long as you have something there that's syncing with the appropriate Git branch or tag.
Yeah, I think.
What do we? Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I think from the infrastructure management perspective also, yes, I think isolation across the clusters and isolation inside the namespaces or inside the application, inside the cluster is better than rather having a single cluster across load and like stage, load, or prod.
And he mentions that, yes, they are running Flux.
I think one thing that accompanies the approach of namespace isolation and also infra isolation is having good visibility into what's going on inside of those isolation environment. So in each namespaces, because as you have several namespaces within your environment, that's becoming difficult to track what resources are hogging up, your CPU, your memory. So it's what, looking into monitoring for those pieces.
Yeah, it also might make sense to run some loads in production clusters. For example, what I used to do is also like have some kind of like every 1 in 100 sample goes to the second service but doesn't send a response, just saves the results. So you can actually like validate, but it's most with Kafka and basically was less a new consumer, but it actually like validated it with the other responses, so to make sure. Then you maybe want to run a development version in your production cluster to get the traffic.
Yeah, so as Mike points out, I guess the question is pros and cons of namespace separation versus separate clusters.
I can say in terms of namespace separation and cluster separation, it really depends on what your application is doing and your workload. I think for larger development teams, they will use a separate cluster, but depending on how resource intensive the application is, maybe a dev environment makes more sense to just do a namespace separation. But as you start to get closer to prod, you want to be more isolated. So then it makes sense to have that in, your QA is a separate cluster and your prod is a separate cluster for better isolation.
Yeah, and there's cost considerations here as well.
Yeah, I think
it's not just a technical decision you're making, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, apart from the cost considerations also, like from the infrastructure perspective, management perspective also, it's a single cluster. I mean, there's a node pools concept, right? You can pool as a node for each cluster. I mean, if they don't have an isolation and run the single cluster and they want to run it, they can run it based on the node pools, like pool of nodes for each application team, and then move it the load based on that.
I see people typing. David says, I'd imagine these multi-tenant clusters have really strong network policy and pod security policies. How are these being managed and audited? That's a good point.
I guess that would depend. I'll find the link, but Calico had a nice little post about managing your network policies through GitOps. The pattern would be have kind of your master branch, your master repo with all your network policies, and they would sync up with the repos. So you have that central auditing place. Per app, network policies would probably be with the repo of the application, though.
Yeah, I think the Tigera is the one that was that's in that which I've worked with previously. That has all the network security policies that you can scale it up from dev, push it to stage or prod based on each environment.
Kurt says we do isolation via namespace and node groups, so a namespace per node group. But think I'm moving to namespace isolation and workload isolation. Not sure if this is the best approach. Interesting. Does anybody else have any opinions on this? question for those of you doing multi-clusters, looking generally over at Marky's direction. I wonder how many of these are like, well, I work with Kubernetes all the time, so I have a bunch of Kubernetes resources, and how that translates to people who are maybe not comfortable or don't have, like, I can't imagine it's a comfortable conversation to be like, hey, I figured out our isolation thing. I need to triple the amount of clusters we're using right now. Right?
It can work like that. Again, it
Yeah.
really depends on I like what Jeff said about the
Mhm.
cost and the cost ratio. And it
Yeah.
depends on the level of experience on your team. It depends on the application. It depends on how quickly you have to get a product out. A lot of times people don't realize that they're working with a product, and you
Mhm.
may not have the luxury of testing everything out. You may have to just go like super fast. And
Yeah.
so there's a lot of considerations to take. I will say isolation for your application is the best thing. So dev can sort of be the Wild West, but as you go to like your QA or stage and prod, it's going to be best to isolate it and maybe even eat that cost, because
Mm.
that means you're getting something to prod, and you don't want to introduce, especially if you have paying customers, you don't want to introduce something bad that's going to take a customer down.
Yeah. Yeah. Chris asks
Marky,
if you.
I have
Oh, sorry.
a question. Can I, or do you want to? How often are you redeploying your clusters for dev? If there's like the Wild West, how much overhead does that add? Or does that add?
Was that a question for me?
Yeah, sorry.
What can you repeat the question? How often am I redeploying clusters?
Yeah, basically recreating clusters. If the dev cluster is like the Wild West, like I said, like how often do you have to restart from scratch to get dev running again?
Yeah, so at one particular company that I worked for in the past, we would have to do that on a weekly basis, and we would back every major release to prod we use something called a value stream. So the backporting would be our feedback loop, and we would backport every change to each environment. And that worked when you have great automation. I've worked at smaller companies where you don't have that luxury, and dev sort of stays in a very bad state for quite a while. But you get very stringent once you get to like QA or staging, and the changes come more frequently. So your automation to keep the changes to a minimum in that cluster and fix them become really critical. So dev, not quite as often for changes. Prod, or excuse me, staging or QA type environment, we would do changes to that once a week, if not more, depending upon the frequency of releases to prod. I hope that answered your question.
Sure.
Yeah, and then Max Guy has more info here. Something to consider could be life cycle or velocity of each separate team. Different teams could have different requirements. Kubernetes version, operators, ingress controllers. It could be complicated to make them all happy in a single cluster. It's a great point as well.
That's correct. And really what that is not only just from a cluster design perspective, but also how your development or engineering flow works.
Mhm.
And you have to take all of these features, you have to understand that. So really what happens here is each team has to be a part of what I call a value stream and know what's coming from a release perspective up the chain. What team is working on a feature request? Because that helps you as a cluster administrator to better design and have impact on that flow when something, release comes down the pipeline from multiple different angles.
That is awesome. That is awesome. That is a fantastic question. So this is why I started this show. Questions like that, because like that's stuff that's just hard to get from a blog or from docs, right? I want to know from someone who's like doing the stuff. Is this a good idea? So that's really love that question. Mark or Mike, I would love for you to come back and let us know how this is going. This is something I would love to just keep checking in on to see how people are getting on. I also appreciate all the advice everyone is giving in the Slack channel. That's really good. But we are running out of time, so it is time for our raffle. Jeff, I need you to roll it looks like a 12-sided die here. Bring a little D&D in our lives. So here,
Actually,
let's see.
I'm counting first. So
Okay, all right.
and
So
then
he's
I'll
gonna
let you
he's
know.
gonna do the raffle, and then we're gonna give away 2 shirts. I'm gonna do a quick follow up here. This is a question that we had actually from December, where the daemon set was not starting on some nodes was due to a bug that was in 1.14 and was fixed in 1.14.2. After a cluster upgrade to 1.15, we have not observed this issue. So awesome. Thanks for that. That is Vinyaka. And the original question was from Ravi Shankar. I remember not being able to answer that. So it relieves me that that was a bug. We are going to do the raffle. Amir, we are out of time. However, we can queue that up for the next session, which will be about 2 hours from now. And we will have totally different panelists and things like that, unless someone wants to hang out in the West Coast edition as well. So with that, roll twice and give me 2 winners. Here's what's going to happen. We're going to announce the winners, and then PM me or I'll PM you. I'm Caster J on Slack, and I will get the information that you need to get your Kubernetes shirt, which we all neglect to wear on the day that we are giving them away. But it's a cool shirt. It's just the Tim Hawking shirt, I call it. Just a logo right in the middle, and then that's it. But the winners are Matt and David. So congratulations to our winners. And I will PM you after that. Panelists, do we have any further comments here? We're going to take about a 2-hour break, and then the show will be back. Thank you so much for joining us. You're always welcome to come back. Those of you listening, if you want to come hang out on this panel, it's a volunteer thing. If you do enough, eventually I get you this totally awesome Kubernetes water bottle. So Pierre, you're going to want to stick around for that water bottle. This is like double vacuum sealed. It's the bomb.
Awesome.
Oh, David
oh
has
no!
a shirt.
Oh, David has a shirt already. So roll again. Awesome. Thanks for giving up that shirt. So the winners are Matt with 1 T, and who's the other winner? Ventcat, you have won a t-shirt, and I will follow up with you. Those of you listening, you're always feel free to hang out in the channel. We like to hang out there in the months before. It's like Kubernetes users, except a little bit smaller. Makes it easier for you to get to know people, things like that. So consider this a place of learning where you can hang out. And with that, we are going to sign off. We will be back in 2 hours. I'm going to collate all these questions. Feel free to keep asking your questions. I will get all the notes and everything and publish them, and I will be letting you know the URLs to all that good stuff here in the channel. Any last comments? Welcome first timers, Marky, Tunda, Pierre, Samudrala. Welcome to our veterans as well. Awesome. We like a nice balanced team. Troy seems to be clapping. At some point, Troy is going to be on the show. Once he finishes getting that CKA, right, buddy? All right, everybody. We'll see everyone in chat, and we'll see everyone in about 2 hours. Cheers.